I'm Steve Zeltzer, the host of Labor on the Job, and joining me this evening is Cindy Sheehan, who is a mother of a GI who was killed in Iraq, and she is now a candidate for Congress in the 8th Congressional District in Northern California, and she is saying that she's a labor candidate and represents working people. So we're having her on tonight to talk with her about the issues and get her views out, since most of corporate media is not interested in covering her story. So welcome to the show. Well, Cindy, first of all, you've been a long-time activist against the war.
Since my son was killed in April of '04.
And were you, you were against the war, even though your son decided to go in the military?
Well, Casey went in the military in May of 2000, and George Bush wasn't even president then. So he went in. Of course, we're working class people, not wealthy. He struggled to put himself through community college, and he completed his AA degree and was ready to go to university and didn't feel he could afford it. And so he, instead of like working out an alternative solution, doing grants, you know, his dad and I helping him out with it, he decided to join the military to help pay for the rest of his college. And so he was in the military. 9/11 happened. You know, George Bush lied this country into invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, and Casey went the end of March of '04, and he was killed April 4th of 2004.
So this, in your opinion, was an economic draft. Basically, he was forced to go because he couldn't afford to.
Well, you know, it's not only an economic draft, and we know that many of our people, you know, brothers and sisters, people of color, are go into the military too, thinking they don't have any other options, that somehow they're going to get job training, you know, or whatever, and that rarely happens. Even Donald Rumsfeld said, "We train people to kill people. We don't train them for jobs." And so Casey wanted to be a chaplain's assistant, you know, because he was a man of faith, but his recruiter lied to him, and when he got to boot camp, they put him in as a Humvee mechanic. And I don't think Casey would have joined if it wasn't for the bonus and for, you know, the college money, which is really unfortunate. And of course, wars are always fought by the working class or the working poor class, and started by you know, the establishment elite, the presidents, the, you know, Congress people whose children don't have to go fight.
And there was a committee in San Francisco in which called the Committee to Free Iraq, and George Shultz was chair of that committee in San Francisco, which organized the invasion of Iraq. And of course, they were discussing what oil fields they wanted.
I first thought you were talking about a committee to free Iraq from the American occupation.
No, that was to free Iraq for our oil,
yeah,
you know,
when
to
you
get our
said George
oil.
Shultz,
You know, that's
I was like, what?
Well, that was the Committee to Free Iraq, which George Shultz was a part of, and they wanted to make sure that U.S. oil companies had the freedom to go and take over the oil fields in Iraq. So
yeah, they divvied them up before the invasion even.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So you began this struggle to get justice and to expose what was going on. Why did you decide to become an anti-war activist?
Well, I don't think I decided so much as it decided me. You know, when my son was killed, I felt deeply ashamed that I hadn't protested before, even though I was against the war and against George Bush. And so after Casey was killed, I just started to investigate even further than I had before, the lies, you know, what was really happening in Iraq. And I joined Military Families Speak Out, and from that we took a group of people in Military Families Speak Out who had loved ones killed, and we formed Gold Star Families for Peace. A Gold Star, mothers get Gold Stars when their children are killed in war, almost like it's some kind of demented Girl Scout badge or something.
Oh, so that's what the Gold Star means.
Yeah, and then I found that of course mothers suffer horribly when their children are killed, but it's an entire family. The brothers and sisters suffer, the father suffers, the aunts and uncles, the grandparents. So, and it's not an honor to get a gold star. You know, it's a nightmare. So we had all these family members that were interested in exposing the lies and helping us, you know, work for peace. So that's why we started Gold Star Families for Peace.
And you wanted to meet with President Bush and talk to him about what was going on. What happened with that effort to have a meeting with him?
Well, on August 3rd of '05, I was sitting at my house and I saw a report on the news that 14 Marines had been killed in Iraq in one incident in one day. And then I saw George Bush come on the news and say they died for a noble cause. And then he said all of the families of the fallen can rest assured that their loved ones died for a noble cause. And of course, I waited for someone in the corporate propaganda press to say, what's a noble cause? You know, George Bush, Mr. President. And nobody did. So I thought, what's wrong with me? I have a voice. I'm going to go down to Crawford, Texas, and I'm going to demand a meeting with the president, ask him for what noble cause my son died, for what noble cause are at that point about 100,000 Iraqis dead and 1,800 other Americans. What noble cause is a country in ruins, and are is our military crippled? And, you know, with so many physical injuries, mental injuries, emotional injuries. And of course, he didn't meet with me. And then
was he afraid to meet with you?
Well, you know, probably. You know, just like Pelosi's afraid to debate me.
You think
George Bush was afraid to meet with me, but you know that he didn't meet with me. So the Camp Casey protests grew to thousands of people that wanted to know the answer to that question.
And you then began a struggle to get Congress to cut off the money. And many Americans, many people, many workers voted for the Democrats in the last election,
right,
with the hopes and the promise,
right,
that if they were elected, they would end the war. What happened in that process? You began to see that actually the war was not going to be ended even if the Democrats got in.
Well, you know, I had been working really diligently on Capitol Hill since even before the summer of '05. And I began to see, especially after the Democrats took office, well, even before the Democrats took office, you know, Nancy Pelosi was saying things like impeachment's off the table.
Why would she say that?
And well, I think she's saying it because she either made a deal with the Bush administration, because she is complicit in such things as torture. She was briefed on America's torture policies in 2002. She knew about the FISA violations as far back as 2001. And she said in an interview recently that how can we hold George Bush accountable when many Democrats voted for the war, you know, fell for the lies, or voting for war funding.
So she's aware of the complicity of herself and others in this criminal war.
Well, you know, of course she always likes to lay the blame on other people and not take responsibility, you know, saying, oh, you know, we're trying as hard as we can to end the war. Well, you know, anybody can see that they're not. Anybody can see that when you pay for something, that's not ending something. And Nancy Pelosi came in saying no blank checks for war.
That was the promise.
And they have given George Bush, since she's been Speaker of the House, many blank checks for war. They just gave him another $183 billion.
That's today they voted, or yesterday?
No, that was for the supplemental funding, was before they went on vacation. Yesterday they approved the Pentagon budget. But every Iraq and Afghanistan bill is supplemental funding. It's not included in the regular budget.
Now, the supporters of the Democrats who've been trying to defend them say, well, they don't really control the votes. They're not 60, and they really can't stop the money going to the Iraq war. And what is the reality behind that?
Well, of course, Nancy Pelosi would like to blame Republicans or blue dog Democrats or the Senate. Her position as Speaker of the House is that she has control over the purse strings. And she doesn't even have to put a bill on the floor. She can say, you know, Mr. President, you have enough money in the pipeline. We're not giving you another penny for this occupation, bring the troops home. But she won't say that because, of course, the leadership in the Democratic Party are not really anti-war. They have...
you met with many of these leaders, didn't you?
Right. You know, they get their pockets lined by the same people that line the pockets of the Republicans. And it's all about obeying Wall Street. It's all about obeying the military-industrial complex when at least 2/3 of this country, probably even more, are against the war and want the troops to come home.
Were you surprised that Senator Obama has said that one of his new ideas was to send 10,000 more troops to Afghanistan?
No, I'm not surprised about that at all. You know, he's not an anti-war candidate. He's not a peace candidate. He says he wants to withdraw troops from Iraq, but he wants to put them in Afghanistan to fight the real war on terror, he says. There is no real war on terror. It was manufactured by the Bush administration. And I think a true peace candidate would stand up and say that we're going to bring our troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan. We're going to work really diligently to solve the problems in the Middle East without killing innocent people. And we've seen the violence in Afghanistan already escalate. You know, the American bombs just killed 90 people at a wedding party. 50 of them were children. And that's what Barack Obama wants. He wants more innocent people to die for empire. And
so you're saying that basically the Democrats, like the Republicans, want to continue the U.S. empire?
Yes, of course. Of course they do. Barack Obama wouldn't be where he is today if he hadn't sold out to the military-industrial complex. He's already sold out to AIPAC. He says that he will bomb Iran for them. Pakistan, he has made aggressive...
He was for invading Pakistan, or bombing in Pakistan?
Yes, he's made aggressive...
Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, Al-Qaeda. He's made aggressive noises towards Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, you know, and we need a leader who will fight for peace. You know, not like they like to fight for peace. You know, George Bush says that this struggle is for peace. Well, you can't have peace when you kill innocent people.
So you're saying there's no military solution?
Well, Barack Obama has even talked about increasing troop strength to increase the Pentagon budget, to increase the U.S. military by 92,000 troops. And that's not to keep America safe, that's for empire. We don't need a bloated military to keep us safe. It's to spread empire.
And how have they paid for this war?
Well, a lot of it has been financed by China. A lot of the trouble we're in today is because just printing, you know, money that is meaningless. Our dollar is becoming worth less and less every day because of this devaluation. And they've paid for it by stealing our children's future and our grandchildren's future. Before they bailed out Freddie and Fannie, our treasury was $5.3 trillion in debt. And Freddie and Fannie doubled that. And so the China and Russia and Saudi Arabia, the people who are buying our bonds, are, you know, very correctly becoming leery of buying any more American bonds or securities.
Well, you began initially to run against Nancy Pelosi, who has refused to debate you.
Well, we haven't had an answer.
You've asked
one
her
way or the other, but we have.
You formally asked her
Yes.
to debate, and
Yes.
what's the response been?
No response at all. I ran into her chief of staff last night, and we reminded him that we have invited her to debate, and he said something in referring, he said he was referring to Palin and Biden debate, but he said that Hubert Humphrey said that you don't debate an amateur because you'll always lose. But I'm sure that it was a direct reference to me inviting Nancy Pelosi to debate. And I think if Nancy Pelosi doesn't debate me, and there's a Republican candidate and a Libertarian candidate, and if she doesn't debate us, that shows her total lack of disrespect for the voters in the 8th District.
Well, she is busy running the country and trying to solve all our problems. So
And
I
that's what
guess
scares me,
I
because
guess she doesn't have
because she has done a real bad job on doing that. Congress has a lower approval rating than George Bush
Well,
does.
on the other issues besides the war, how do you differ with Nancy Pelosi and her policies?
Well, I would have not pushed the telecom immunity. I would not have given George Bush more power to spy on Americans without warrants. I differ on her funding the war, and the reason I got into this race was her taking impeachment off the table. I believe that it's her constitutional duty, it was her constitutional duty to allow impeachment to go forward. Before the Democrats came in power, John Conyers from Michigan, who's now the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, wrote articles of impeachment against George Bush. He wrote a book called The Constitution in Crisis. I mean, clearly, George Bush and Dick Cheney have committed high crimes and misdemeanors, and it's not, it's not to punish George Bush and Dick Cheney. It's for justice. It's for accountability. Nobody was held accountable for Vietnam.
Well, Dennis Kucinich previously, before he most recently supported impeachment, said that the accountability will be in the election. That's how you'll have accountability. But what you're saying is beyond the election, there needs to be accountable
Well,
process.
how has George Bush been held accountable through the electoral process? And Dennis Kucinich knows more than me how that process is corrupted, especially in his own state of Ohio. So that's one way that the American public can hold elected officials accountable if we had credible elections.
Now, in San Francisco, issues of working class housing, issues of health care for the people of San Francisco, the working people, are very serious issues. Ethnic cleansing in Hunters Point and Bayview, privatization of the schools. Are these issues that you see as important for the working people of San Francisco?
Well, I think that they're important for, not just working people in San Francisco, but across this country. Almost 50 million Americans don't have health care. The Democrats' plan is for affordable health insurance.
You mean buying insurance from insurance companies?
Right,
That's the right idea of
keeping the
healthcare.
insurance companies involved in the system, keeping Big Pharma involved in the system, keeping the HMOs and PPOs involved in the system. The only solution to our healthcare crisis, to lower costs and to get all of these lobbyists out of the debate or out of the system, is to have single-payer health care, to support H.R. 646.
And 676.
676.
And I
Thank
understand Nancy has said that she's not going to support that, or she's not one of the supporters of single payer.
Well, she is one of the leaders in the Democratic Party, and their platform is for affordable insurance. Nancy Pelosi actually gets a significant amount of money from pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies.
So she actually takes money from the companies that she says are causing a problem.
Clear
conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. But I think the affordable health care plan is to keep Big Pharma, to keep the health insurance companies in the deliverance of health insurance.
Now, the trade unions, the San Francisco Labor Council, there was a motion to have a debate between you and Nancy.
To
Cindy,
sponsor a debate, right?
Yeah, to sponsor a debate with all the candidates.
Right.
And Mike Casey, who's president of the San Francisco Labor Council and also president of Hotel and Restaurant Workers Local 2, said it would be indulgence on the part of the Labor Council to ask Nancy to come to a debate here in San Francisco with all the candidates. Now, the state AFL-CIO has endorsed Nancy Pelosi, but do you think it's indulgence on the part of the Labor Council to ask that there be a debate for a congressional district in San Francisco?
Well, I think that a debate would only enhance democracy. A democracy is only enhanced when there's more choices. And in my case, I've been here for over a year, and the corporate media has practically, blacked our campaign out. And they've only covered us when they had no other choice but to cover us. Like when we attained ballot status, historically attained ballot status on August 8th.
As an independent candidate.
As an independent candidate. They covered us. But I think when, you know, organizations like the Labor Council, Nancy Pelosi's policies have not been friendly to labor.
She was supportive of privatization.
She supported free trade agreements. She is not calling, like my campaign's calling, for the repeal of Taft-Hartley, the
which
repeal.
prevents solidarity.
Right, the repeal of such horrible legislation that hurt working families, like when they repealed Glass-Steagall in 1999, that prevented the consolidation of finance companies and speculation in securities. They repealed that, and look where we are today. Nancy Pelosi supported that.
So you really feel she's not been held accountable by the very policies that she supported, which have hurt labor?
Well, and then for the Labor Council to be so anti-democratic. You know, they're pro-democratic party, but anti-democracy. And, you know, I think that they would jump at the chance to host a debate, and that would be a high-profile debate. I mean, we would really get into some meaningful meat and potato issues, not like the presidential debates.
Now, that's another issue, and that is tonight or tomorrow night, the McCain has decided it doesn't want to debate Obama, but other candidates are being kept out of it, and it's in the midst of this great financial crisis that we're going through. Why are we having this financial crisis today?
Well, we only have a few more minutes, but we'll try to get into it.
I mean, they're trying to, they say the mortgages, there's been speculation by these mortgage companies and the banks. And
well,
now
absolutely. You know, they sold this mortgage insurance and securities where many people can like be involved in just one mortgage, and the way they profit is if that mortgage fails, right? And they can buy insurance up to whatever the property is worth. So they inflate the prices. They artificially inflate prices. So this was the mortgage bubble. They artificially inflate appraisals, and everybody's working together. And when the bubble bursts, who gets hurt? The homeowner, you know, the regular American. So I think that, you know, the bubble is the thing that started to bring all of the, you know, the house of cards tumbling down when the bubble burst.
Isn't this capitalism?
Right.
I mean, that's what happens in capitalism.
Well,
you have bubbles and speculation, and then it blows up, and then you've got to liquidate and destroy. And
right. So we have capitalism for profits, but when these companies fail, they want to do a socialistic bailout. They want to use my tax dollars, you know, and your tax dollars and everybody's tax dollars to bail these companies out.
$700 billion.
That's socialism. But if you talk about using our tax dollars for like single payer health care or education, they say, oh, but that's socialism. So it's okay, socialism for the fat cat established corporate elite, but not for the people in the streets who are struggling.
And people are suffering greatly. In San Francisco, people are afraid of losing their jobs, losing their pensions. The San Francisco city employees were part of their 401k was IAG. So all these, their life savings are threatened. Now, what is the solution? I mean, you say now that you're against the bailout of these banks and mortgage companies. What is the solution for working people?
Well, there has to be a comprehensive solution, and what I think is so incredible is Nancy Pelosi owns, and her family owns, about $500,000 worth of stock in AIG. And then the government gives it an $82 billion bailout. You know, how come nobody is screaming conflict of interest? You know, the solution, part of the solution is to get all of money out of politics and have campaigns publicly financed. That would level the playing field. Everybody has counted me out, and the reason they've counted me out is because they say Pelosi has raised like $2.3 million, and I've only raised $400,000.
But does she have even a campaign office in San Francisco?
She has no. She's not campaigning at all. All her money has gone out of the district for other races, and she says she'll be out campaigning for Barack Obama around the country.
So she's not even bothering in San
She's not
Francisco.
even bothering
She's got
to
such a
come
great
here
record.
to
She
even
doesn't have
show
to
her
campaign.
face.
You think that's
here.
contempt for the people of San
I
Francisco?
think it's contempt and it's disrespect for the people of San Francisco. And our campaign is going to be very aggressive. But, you know, so we need to get corporate money out of politics. We need to get people who represent the people. You know, we need right now on a short-term solution, we need more, you know, foreclosure moratorium. We need credit card debt. We need the interest rates to be reduced. We need...
Do you believe in private control of these banks that the government is going to take over?
No. No, not at all. And of course I don't believe that the government should take them over either. But I think that there's no taxpayer bailouts. I wrote an article putting conditions on those kind of bailouts, but now after all the research I've done, I'm like, no bailouts at all.
So if things start to close down and they're threatening, they're kind of terrorizing people in this country, you either give us $700 billion
Right.
or we're going to shut down the economy.
Right.
Now, if they do shut down, or if the capitalist economy does start to collapse and they start laying off people and closing down stores or closing down factories, what should people do?
Well, I think that it has to be a New Deal, a New Deal solution. You know, the government can have jobs programs, putting people to work, repairing our crumbling infrastructure, cleaning up the environment.
A transportation system?
Our transportation system, everything that has been neglected in these past decades need to be restructured. And I don't buy their fear tactics. George Bush and the federal government are using the same fear tactics they used on us and on Congress to push through the authorization to attack Iraq. If we don't do it right now,
emergency,
the entire system is going to... If we don't attack and bomb Saddam right now, you know, they're going to fly drone planes over and drop weapons of mass destruction on the East Coast. It's fear tactics. And Americans need to... I don't think Americans are buying these fear tactics.
Well, the majority of people, it's kind of interesting because the polls that has been taken in the media say that 70, 80, 90% of the people, the constituents, are saying no.
Right.
We don't want this. And yet...
I saw a poll that said 7% of Americans are in favor of a bailout, which would be what, Goldman Sachs CEOs and their families?
And yet the Congress says that they want to get together and do this, including Congresswoman Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi.
Of course they do, because they're all in bed together. It's an incestuous relationship. It's not about, you know, last night Pelosi's spokesperson said, we're going to bail these people out, but we have to put in protections for the taxpayers. They're already stealing our money to do it. So how do we protect ourselves from having our money stolen to bail out these Wall Street corporate pirates?
Well, what would you do if you were elected in Congress, or when you get elected in Congress? What would the first thing you would do?
Well, the first, you know, we have to get over this, you know, what's happening now in the economy. And we have to do it in a way that doesn't reward people for stealing from Americans. You know, this has been going on, neoliberalism has been going on for decades outside of the country. And now those neoliberal trickle-down economics is destroying America. My plan is not trickle-down economics, but gurgle-up economics. Put people to work at a living wage. Give people health insurance. Give people the right to free and good education, all the way up to university. We have the capacity in America to do this if we're not paying corporate welfare. And if those people pay their fair share of taxes, we have the ability in America to do that. But there's no will. There's no will up above. There's no will for it to trickle down to our brothers and sisters on the streets.
Well, your voice tonight, for example, is not going to go on PBS or KQED, and isn't part of the problem that Nancy Pelosi and these politicians have deregulated the media.
Right.
So now that the televisions say that they want millions of dollars to get on TV, when it should be all qualified candidates should have equal time on TV, and they shouldn't be able to spend maybe $1 billion they're going to be spending on this election cycle?
Well, that's what I'm talking about, public financing and fair and equal access to the airwaves.
So you would say that the commercial television companies would not be able to dominate and just use people based on how much money they have for the elections?
Well, and our democracy shouldn't go to the highest bidder. It should go to the most qualified candidate. Nancy Pelosi has proven that she does not care about the people of San Francisco. She does not care about the people of this nation. Obviously, she doesn't care about the people of Iraq and Afghanistan. She has used her power, her position of power, to enrich herself, to enrich her circle of people who are already rich. I call it the reverse Robin Hood effect, stealing from the poor to give to the rich. Nancy Pelosi was for privatization of the Presidio. She's for gentrification of Bayview, Hunters Point. You know, other neighborhoods in her reign have been gentrified. They want to run the working class and people of color out of San Francisco. We all know it's horribly expensive to live here. They tried to ram through you know, doing away with rent control in the primaries, and you know, we saw through that and that didn't pass. But you know, I'm working class. I have been raised working class. I raised my children working class. I know the way people struggle intimately. I know every struggle that families can go through. I know the struggle of having to sacrifice a child for the military-industrial complex. You know, I haven't had a child killed in the streets like some of my brothers and sisters have, but it's the same war. You know, our kids are fighting in Iraq the same war that's being fought in the streets of San Francisco, and that's a war. It's the elite versus the rest of us. And until we grab our power back and elect somebody who will fight for the people, that's never going to happen.
But you don't see the solution as just electing somebody like yourself. I mean, that wouldn't by itself change the situation.
That's not, of course, that's not the only solution. I think that we need to organize. I think that unions need to take back their
control and power,
and take back, you know, some kind of a fire to take that control and power back. Unions were what strengthened the economy of this nation, and breaking the unions and having this, you know, top-down union leadership is destroying our economy.
So
it's part of the reason our economy is our middle class, our working class is being destroyed.
So you're against the effort of Andy Stern, the president of the SEIU, to put the United Healthcare Workers in trusteeship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the people in those unions need to hit the streets. And
also get involved, like yourself, and run for office as independent candidates.
Well, and support people who will strongly be for the working class.
And what do you see the future of this country? Another quick
I would
question.
love to be optimistic. I would love to be optimistic, and even if the economy does collapse and capitalism collapses, that it's restructured in a more our economy is restructured in a more humane way. I think that one of the absolute imperatives is to reduce the military-industrial complex. We spend over $1 trillion a year on our military, where $1 trillion a year could fund single-payer health care. And instead of supporting and funding empire, we support and fund the people.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope we could have a debate with you and Nancy at some point. And I think those in our audience that want to see a debate should demand that there be a debate. We have a real democratic discussion and debate.
Well, call the Speaker's office, because I'm already on board for that.
Okay, and they can go to your website, which is?
cindyforcongress.org, cindyforcongress.org.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.